Welcome. Take a slow, deep breath and allow your body to begin relaxing. Feel the surface beneath you supporting your weight. There's nothing you need to do right now except listen. Tonight, we'll journey through true stories that unfolded during the Christmas season, a time typically filled with joy and light, which in these cases turned unexpectedly dark. These accounts are real and deeply tragic, but we will explore them gently, like a quiet documentary of winter nights long past. There's no need to solve anything or react, just let the stories flow over you. As you listen, remember you are safe here. The events we describe happened far away and long ago. If any emotions arise, acknowledge them and let them drift by. Each story will be told with care and respect for the victims, without graphic detail or sensationalism. You might picture the scene softly in your mind: glowing lights on a Christmas tree, soft shadows dancing on snow, and then notice how the peaceful image contrasts with the tragedy that unfolds. Through it all, keep breathing slowly and evenly. Let the tension release with each exhale. Our first story takes us to a quiet suburban neighborhood on Christmas Eve. Imagine a street decorated with twinkling lights and holiday wreaths on the doors. It's a chilly night in Southern California. The palm trees are still, and the stars shine above a city at rest. Inside one cozy home, an extended family has gathered to celebrate the holiday. Laughter, music, and the warm aroma of Christmas dinner fill the air. From the outside, it looks like the perfect picture of Christmas joy. But in a few moments, this peaceful scene will be shattered by unspeakable violence. It is late on December 24th, 2008, in the suburban city of Covina, California. At the home of Joseph and Alicia Ortega, an annual Christmas Eve party is winding down with about 25 family members and friends gathered. The Ortega family's adult children and grandchildren are all together under one roof, enjoying each other's company. Some are in the living room chatting and playing games. Others are in the dining area picking at leftovers from dinner. An 8-year-old girl, one of the Ortega granddaughters, plays near the front door, still wearing the pretty dress she had on for the occasion. The house is aglow with colored lights, and the fireplace casts a gentle flicker on the walls. Outside, the neighborhood is quiet. Only the faint sound of a distant car passing and the rustle of a cold breeze in the trees. It's nearly 11:30 p.m. on what should have been a night of cheer and togetherness. No one inside the Ortega home knows that a guest in a Santa Claus costume is about to arrive uninvited. Down the street, a man in a bulky Santa suit walks slowly toward the house, holding a large, gift-wrapped package in his arms. His name is Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, and he is the Ortega's estranged son-in-law, the ex-husband of their daughter Sylvia. In 1 week, Bruce Pardo has gone from finalizing a bitter divorce to preparing for mass murder. Hidden beneath the cheerful red and white Santa outfit, he is carrying 4 loaded 9mm semi-automatic handguns. Inside the brightly wrapped present he holds is a homemade incendiary device, a pressurized tank filled with highly flammable racing fuel, fashioned into a crude flamethrower. Pardo's mind is fixated on vengeance. He approaches the Ortega residence deliberately, illuminated by the Christmas lights adorning the home. From inside, festive music plays, and voices murmur happily, oblivious to the danger about to burst through their door. Around 11:30 that night, the doorbell rings. The 8-year-old granddaughter, excited to see who might be arriving so late on Christmas Eve, runs to answer the front door. She opens it to find Santa Claus on the doorstep, Bruce Pardo in disguise. In that split second before joy can turn to confusion, Pardo pulls out a handgun and shoots the child in the face without a word. The little girl collapses, critically wounded, and pandemonium erupts inside. Pardo strides into the house, stepping past the gravely injured child on the floor. He immediately opens fire on the party guests, spraying bullets into the terrified crowd at random. People scream and scramble for cover. One man is struck down near the Christmas tree. Others dive under tables or behind furniture. The joyful gathering has turned into a scene of sheer horror in an instant. Amid the chaos, some family members manage to break away. A few partygoers sprint out the back door into the night, frantically seeking safety. One woman on the second floor, hearing gunshots and sensing the unfolding massacre, jumps from a window and lands hard on the ground below, breaking her ankle but surviving. Inside, Pardo keeps moving methodically from room to room. After firing an initial indiscriminate barrage, he begins targeting victims one by one, as if carrying out executions. The gunfire is relentless and ear-splitting in the enclosed space. In those terrifying minutes, 9 people are shot to death or fatally wounded by Pardo's bullets, including his ex-wife Sylvia, both of her elderly parents, and several of her siblings-in-laws. 3 generations of the Ortega family are being wiped out in their own home. Somewhere amid the gunshots and shattering glass, Bruce Pardo pauses to unleash the second phase of his plan. He sets down the gift-wrapped package he brought and tears it open, revealing a makeshift flamethrower device attached to a fuel tank. With a cruel determination, he begins spraying high-octane fuel all around the house, on the Christmas tree, across the carpet and furniture, over the bodies of those he's shot. The air fills with the sickly, sweet odor of gasoline. Within moments, the flammable vapor meets an ignition source, perhaps a candle or the fireplace, and an explosion erupts. Flames whoosh through the living room and up the walls, flashing over the ceiling. The blaze spreads with stunning speed, setting the house on fire from within. The once cozy Ortega home is transformed into an inferno of heat and smoke. Pardo, still in his Santa suit, makes his escape amid the confusion, but not before the fire sears his own legs and arms, melting parts of the Santa costume onto his skin. He staggers out of the burning house, suffering severe burns, but intent on carrying out the rest of his getaway plan. Inside, the inferno rages. It will take 80 firefighters nearly 2 hours to extinguish the flames that consume the Ortega residence. By the time the fire is out, the home is reduced to charred ruins, with thick smoke still rising into the night sky. Survivors from the party are in shock, some with injuries from gunfire or falls. Amid the devastation, 9 bodies lie in the ash and debris. The victims' remains are so badly burned that authorities will later have to identify many of them through dental records. Yet even in this hellish scene, there is a glimmer of mercy. The 8-year-old girl, who was shot at the door, is miraculously still alive, though gravely wounded. Somehow, she had managed to crawl away from the entryway after being shot. Her mother, one of Sylvia's sisters, had escaped the house with her, and now frantically seeks help for her bleeding child. In the chaos following the attack, a survivor makes an urgent phone call to authorities. "I need someone to come over and help my daughter," a woman screams into a phone, her voice hoarse with panic. She is calling from a neighbor's house, having fled through the flames with her injured little girl. The 911 dispatcher tries to calm her and asks who the shooter was. "His name is Bruce Pardo," the woman manages to say. "He's my ex-brother-in-law. He's still shooting out there." That name, Bruce Pardo, quickly gets relayed to Covina police. First responders are already racing toward what they've been told is a mass shooting and house fire. Fire trucks and police cruisers, their sirens piercing the late-night silence, converge on the street, only to find the Ortega home engulfed in flames. Firefighters leap into action, battling the blaze, while officers set up a perimeter and search for the shooter. At first, responders cannot be sure if the gunman is still on site or among the victims in the house. What they encounter is almost beyond description. They were met with a scene that was just indescribable. Covina's police chief later says of that first entry into the burned-out home, "The aftermath of Bruce Pardo's rampage is one of absolute devastation." When the flames are finally doused in the early hours of Christmas Day 2008, investigators begin the grim task of accounting for the dead and injured. They soon confirm that 9 people have been killed, their ages ranging from 17 to 79. Among the dead are Sylvia Pardo, 43, Bruce Pardo's ex-wife, as well as Sylvia's mother, Alicia, 70, and father, Joseph, 79. Also killed are Sylvia's 2 brothers, Charles, 50, and James, 52, and their wives, Sherry, 45, and Teresa, 52, another sister or sister-in-law, Alicia, 46, and a teenage nephew, Michael, 17. It is a staggering loss for the Ortega family. 3 generations gone in one night of terror. The 3 survivors include the 8-year-old girl, who miraculously endures her gunshot wound, along with a woman who escaped by jumping from an upper floor, and another who fled out the door. All are rushed to the hospital, the little girl in critical condition. Outside the ruined home, police and federal agents comb the scene for evidence through the night. By daybreak, it is clear the suspect, Bruce Pardo, is nowhere to be found among the living or the dead at the house. A statewide alert is issued for the Santa shooter. But unbeknownst to the authorities racing to find him, Pardo has already taken his final step. Around 3 a.m. on Christmas Day, just a few hours after the massacre, Bruce Pardo dies by suicide at his brother's house, about 40 miles away in the Sylmar area of Los Angeles. He had driven there immediately after the attack. Pardo's brother was not home that night. Alone and badly burned from the fire, Pardo put a gun in his mouth and ended his own life. When police learn of his death, they finally know the rampage is over. But the investigation into Pardo's actions and motives is only beginning, and what they discover is a chilling picture of meticulous premeditation. Detectives soon uncover that Bruce Pardo had been planning this attack for weeks, if not months. Despite the Santa suit disguise and the seemingly sudden explosion of violence, nothing about Pardo's plot was haphazard. He had rigged up the flamethrower device at home, even testing how it would spray fuel. He armed himself with 4 handguns, purchased legally in the months prior. In the days leading up to Christmas, Pardo made careful preparations for an escape. He rented several cars and parked one near the home of his ex-wife's divorce attorney, which he filled with maps of Mexico, supplies, and water, possibly intending to harm the attorney or use that car to flee south of the border. He also bought an airline ticket for a Christmas Day flight from Los Angeles to Illinois, planning to visit a friend in the Midwest after escaping. And he withdrew a large amount of cash, over $10,000, which he strapped to his body inside a girdle for easy concealment. Every aspect of the assault and getaway was thought out. Investigators even find that Pardo booby-trapped his rental car back in Covina. He had left behind his Santa suit in the vehicle and rigged it with explosives and 200 rounds of ammunition, meant to detonate and destroy evidence if moved. The bomb squad later safely disarms this jerry-rigged bomb, preventing further injuries. It becomes evident that Pardo intended to survive the massacre and vanish, leaving a grotesque scene behind him. Only the severe burns he suffered, which melted the Santa costume to his skin and likely caused excruciating pain, appeared to have derailed his escape plan, leading him instead to kill himself in his brother's home. As the dust settles, law enforcement and the public are left asking the haunting question, why would someone do this? The story that emerges of Bruce Pardo's life in 2008 offers some clues. Pardo was a 45-year-old software engineer who, by outward appearances, had led a fairly ordinary life. He had worked for companies like ITT and Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California. He married Sylvia Ortega in 2006, becoming a stepfather to her 3 children from a previous relationship. But beneath the surface, there were serious problems. The marriage deteriorated within a year, reportedly because Pardo refused to share his finances and expected Sylvia to support her own kids on her own. In 2008, their relationship fully imploded. That June, a court ordered Pardo to pay $1,685 a month in spousal support to Sylvia. He bitterly complained to friends that Sylvia was taking him to the cleaners financially. The situation worsened when Pardo lost his job as an electrical engineer in July 2008, making those support payments a burden. By December 18, 2008, just 1 week before the massacre, Bruce and Sylvia's divorce was finalized in court. The settlement allowed Sylvia to keep the couple's dog, her wedding ring, and a $10,000 cash payment, while Pardo was relieved of the monthly support due to his unemployment. 7 days later, on Christmas Eve, instead of moving on with his life, Bruce Pardo chose to exact a horrific revenge. Digging deeper, investigators learn of an even darker chapter in Pardo's past that may have fed into his rage. Years earlier, Pardo had a son from a previous relationship, a boy named Bruce Jr., who was left permanently brain damaged in a swimming pool accident while under Pardo's care. Overwhelmed with guilt and unable to cope, Pardo abandoned his young son and the child's mother, providing no support as the boy grew up severely disabled. Shockingly, Sylvia discovered that Pardo had been claiming this child as a dependent on his taxes for years, despite never helping with the medical bills. This revelation enraged her and became another factor in the divorce. By Christmas time 2008, Bruce Pardo was isolated, fired from his job, divorced, and living alone. In the view of a psychologist consulted by one news outlet, the trappings of the holiday season may have further unhinged him. Seeing others happy when he was so unhappy could have fueled a destructive resentment. Whatever the precise combination of personal failures and simmering anger, Pardo allowed his grievances to fester into a monstrous plan. In the aftermath of the Covina massacre, the community was left stunned. The story dominated national headlines. A killer Santa who had massacred an entire family on Christmas Eve. For a community that normally celebrates the season with nativity scenes and neighborhood parties, it was almost impossible to comprehend such violence occurring on a holy night meant for peace. Neighbors and friends of Pardo struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the atrocity he committed. Pardo had no criminal record and no history of violence. He had even spent time as a volunteer usher at his church, giving no warning signs of the evil he was capable of. "We never saw this coming. We never thought this would ever happen," his stunned brother said to reporters the next day. For the relatives of the Ortega family who weren't present that night, an unimaginable grief set in. In a single night, they lost parents, siblings, and children. Christmas Day 2008 in Covina dawned cold and gray, with the Ortega home still smoldering and police tape surrounding the property. The street that had been filled with festive cheer hours before was now lined with emergency vehicles and coroner's vans. Residents left flowers, candles, and teddy bears on the sidewalk in memory of the victims. News cameras rolled as investigators carried out evidence and as coroners respectfully removed the bodies. The whole nation seemed to pause in shock at the magnitude of the tragedy. Many asked themselves how such cruelty and rage could erupt during the most joyous time of the year. The Covina Christmas Eve massacre remains one of the most horrific crimes ever committed during the holiday season. To this day, the sheer brutal contrast of the event stands out. A man dressed as Santa Claus, the symbol of childhood innocence and holiday goodwill, perpetrated an act of extreme violence against his own family on Christmas Eve. In the years since, the story has been recounted as a cautionary tale of how desperation and anger can spiral into destruction. Psychologists note that the pressures and emotions of the holidays can sometimes trigger latent resentments in disturbed individuals, but nothing can truly explain the cold-blooded massacre of 9 people in the way Bruce Pardo carried out that night. As you reflect on this story, take a moment to breathe deeply. Feel the weight of these events begin to lift. It's okay to feel sadness for the victims and even disbelief at what happened. Acknowledge those feelings. Then let them go with each slow exhale. Remember that in the darkness of that night, there were also glimmers of light. The courage of survivors who escaped and helped identify the killer. The dedication of first responders who faced an indescribable scene, and the compassion of neighbors and strangers who later reached out to support the surviving family members. Such acts of kindness are the true spirit of the season, enduring even in the face of tragedy. With each breath, imagine the flicker of the candlelight vigil that was held in Covina in memory of the Ortega family. See how the darkness of night is gently pushed back by those small, hopeful lights. In your mind, you might offer a silent wish of peace for the victims and their loved ones. Now, allow the image to fade. The story's over. Christmas Eve has turned to Christmas morning. The streets are quiet again. Let the sadness and shock of the tale melt away, and feel the present moment around you. The safety of your room, the softness of your pillow, the warmth of your blanket. In our next segment, we will journey to another Christmas tragedy from a different time and place. For now, rest and breathe. The night is calm once more. When you're ready, we will continue our exploration of these somber Christmas stories, moving forward with care and peace. Our next story occurs on Christmas Eve 1945, the Sauter family home in Fayetteville. West Virginia was filled with holiday cheer. George and Jenny Sauter, Italian immigrants and respected members of their community were celebrating with 9 of their 10 children. Their eldest son was away in the army. The night was cold and clear in the Appalachian foothills, but inside the white 2-story timber house, warmth and laughter prevailed. 19-year-old Marion Sauter had brought home surprise gifts from her job at the dime store for her younger siblings. Martha, 12, Jenny Jr., 8, and Betty, 5. Delighted, the little ones begged to stay up past their usual bedtime to play with their new toys. Jenny, their mother, agreed. It was a special night after all, and allowed 5 of the children to keep playing as long as her 2 middle sons, Maurice, 14, and Louis, 9, remembered to finish their evening farm chores of feeding the chickens and cows before bed. As the grandfather clock ticked past midnight into Christmas Day, 1945, most of the household was asleep. George Sauter and his 2 oldest boys, John 22 and George Jr. 16, had turned in early after a long day's work. Jenny carried 2-year-old Sylvia, the baby of the family, upstairs with her and settled in for the night. The only sounds were the crackle of the dying fireplace embers and the hushed giggles of the children still awake, reveling in the magic of Christmas. No one in the Sauter family could have imagined that this peaceful holiday scene was about to explode into a nightmare. Around 12:30 a.m., the telephone rang loudly in the hall, jolting Jenny Sauter from her sleep. In the silent house, the shrill ring was unexpected at that hour. She hurried downstairs, careful not to wake George, and answered the phone. On the line was a woman's voice she didn't recognize, asking for a name that meant nothing to Jenny. In the background, she could hear strange laughter and the clinking of glasses, as if a party was underway. Jenny, puzzled, told the caller she must have the wrong number. The woman let out a weird laugh, Jenny later recalled before hanging up. Frowning, Jenny put the receiver down. Wrong numbers happen, she thought. Perhaps it was merry revelers who had dialed mistakenly on Christmas Eve. She dismissed it as a prank call born of holiday frivolity and turned off the light. Before heading back upstairs, Jenny noticed something odd. The house was not as she had left it. Normally, the last person awake turned off all the lights, drew the curtains, and locked the doors. But now, the downstairs lights were still glowing, the curtains were open, and the front door was unlocked. The children who stayed up should have done these chores. With a tired sigh of annoyance, Jenny made the rounds. She turned off the lights, drew the curtains, and locked up the house. She saw her daughter Marion asleep on the living room sofa, but the other 4 children who had been up later were nowhere in sight. Jenny assumed they had all slipped off to the attic loft where the children slept. It was not unusual. The kids often used the attic as their bedroom and playroom. Satisfied that everything was in order, Jenny returned to bed. Outside, the town of Fayetteville slumbered. It was a small coal mining community nestled in the dark hills, home to many Italian-American families like the Sauters. World War II had ended only a few months earlier, in August 1945, so this Christmas was a particularly celebratory one for families relieved by peace. Yet, in the quiet of this early Christmas morning, something sinister was brewing at the Sauter residence. Just as Jenny started to drift back to sleep, a sudden loud thump on the roof startled her awake around 1 a.m. It was a heavy, thudding bang, as if something landed on the shingles above. She held her breath for a moment. Then came a strange rolling noise, like an object tumbling down the slope of the roof. Heart pounding, Jenny listened. Silence followed. Perhaps it was just a clump of snow or ice dislodged by wind. It was December, but Fayetteville hadn't reported heavy snowfall that night. Confused and a bit uneasy, Jenny eventually convinced herself it was nothing urgent. When no further sounds came, she tried to sleep once more. About a half hour later, around 1:30 a.m., Jenny woke again, this time to the odor of smoke seeping into the bedroom. Thick, acrid smoke was curling under her bedroom door. Instantly alert, she jumped out of bed. Fire! She shook George awake and raced to rouse the children. Downstairs, she discovered flames had erupted in George's small home office, which also housed the fuse box and telephone line. The blaze was rapidly spreading along the walls. George sprang into action, shouting for his older sons. The couple's instinct was to gather all their children and escape, but the staircase to the attic was already engulfed by fire, cutting off the children sleeping upstairs. Panic set in as the reality became clear. 5 of the Sauter children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny Jr., and Betty, were trapped upstairs, with flames consuming the only stairway down. George and Jenny, along with 2-year-old Sylvia and the 2 eldest boys, John and George Jr., and Marion from downstairs, managed to flee the burning house into the frigid night. Outside, under the cold stars, they shouted desperately for the other children. There was no answer except the roar of fire. Later, John Sauter would change his account of that moment. At first, he told police he had run to the attic and seen his siblings, shaking them to wake up. But he later recanted, saying he had only called up the attic stairs and never actually saw them in their beds. This inconsistency was never fully explained, but in the chaos and trauma of the moment, such details were hard to recall with certainty. Within minutes, the Sauter home was fully ablaze, the firelight painting the yard in flickering orange. George Sauter's mind raced. He had to save his children upstairs, or at least try. He could not simply stand by. As neighbors began to notice the glow and commotion, George made frantic rescue attempts that would later seem almost cursed in their failure. George first smashed a downstairs window to re-enter the house, slicing open his arm on the glass in the process. He was bleeding, but he barely noticed. Inside, heat and smoke blasted him. Flames had swept across the living and dining rooms, the kitchen, and his office. Coughing, eyes stinging, George could see nothing through the black smoke. The staircase was a column of fire, barring any ascent to the second floor. He knew the layout well. 2 of his beloved children's bedrooms were up there off either end of a hallway, but he could not reach them. Driven back by the scorching heat, George stumbled out to the lawn, his voice hoarse from screaming their names into the inferno. Think. There had to be another way up. Outside, George remembered the sturdy ladder he kept propped against the side of the house. He always left it at the ready, resting against an exterior wall. Rushing to grab the ladder, he was baffled to find it missing from its usual spot. In the dim firelight and confusion, he and his son scoured the perimeter of the house, but the ladder was nowhere nearby. It would only be found later, thrown down an embankment about 75 feet away, as if deliberately hidden. Every second without the ladder was a second lost. George's next idea was to drive his work trucks up to the side of the house. He owned 2 heavy-duty coal trucks from his hauling business, which were parked a few yards away. If he could maneuver one truck right under the attic window, perhaps the children could jump onto it, or he could climb on top of the cab to reach them. With Marion and the older boy's help, George cranked the first truck's ignition. The engine wouldn't start. Frantic, he ran to the second truck. Incredibly, that truck too refused to start, even though both had functioned perfectly the day before. The engines groaned but did not catch. Some would later speculate, was it sabotage that both trucks mysteriously failed on this crucial night? George wondered if the engines had been tampered with, perhaps drained of fuel or damaged, but there was no time to investigate. As flames clawed out of the windows, George tried one more idea. A water barrel kept outside for farm animals. He sprinted to it, hoping to fill a bucket and douse the lower flames. But the harsh winter had turned the water to solid ice. He smashed at it in vain. The barrel might as well have been a block of stone. Every attempt was thwarted. Cut by glass, choked by smoke, and now nearly hysterical, George could only watch in anguish as the house became an all-consuming blaze. Jenny Sauter, clutching baby Sylvia, stood outside in nothing but her nightgown, screaming for her children. Marion and the boys huddled around her, helplessly sobbing and shouting. They could do nothing but look on as the home collapsed in flames. I kept watching the upstairs windows, hoping for some sign of them, Marion later said. She never saw even a shadow. I never smelled burning flesh. They say you can smell it for miles, but I never did. For 45 minutes, the Sauter house burned. Neighbors gathered, drawn by the light and horror, but without a telephone or firefighting equipment, they were powerless. By 2 a.m., the house had been reduced to a smoldering heap of ash and glowing embers. The 5 children were presumed to have perished inside, and the surviving family members were devastated and in shock. Fayetteville's volunteer fire department was only about 2 miles away, but on this Christmas morning it was alarmingly slow to respond. Multiple attempts to call for help had failed. Marion had run to a neighbor's house to phone the fire department, but got no operator response. A passing motorist had spotted the flames and tried to call from a tavern, but again the phone rang unanswered. Eventually, that motorist drove into town and tracked down Fire Chief F.J. Morris in person. Fayetteville, like many small towns in 1945, relied on an informal phone tree system for fire alarms. One firefighter would call another and so on. This night, it failed terribly. Due to wartime shortages, manpower was low. Many young men were away in the service or had lost their lives in Wave 2. Chief Morris finally assembled a crew and a fire truck, but they did not arrive at the Sauter ruins until 8 a.m., roughly 7 hours too late. By dawn, as a pale winter sun rose on Christmas Day, nothing remained of the Sauter home but a smoking pile of ashes in the basement foundation. The weary firemen, including one of Jenny's own brothers among them, could do little. They picked through the hot debris, searching for any trace of the 5 children. Given the circumstances, they expected to find bones or identifiable remains. But as the morning went on, no remains were located. Chief Morris himself was puzzled. In a typical house fire, there are usually skeletal fragments, or teeth even if victims perish. According to one report, a few bone fragments and possibly some internal organs were found, but this account was not confirmed, and, if true, the findings were never communicated to the grieving family. The official stance which Morris conveyed to George and Jenny was that the children's bodies had been entirely consumed by the intense heat of the fire. He suggested that the blaze had burned hot enough and long enough to cremate all 5 children completely, leaving no trace. George and Jenny Sauter were devastated. 5 death certificates were issued just before New Year's, attributing the causes of death to fire or suffocation. On December 30th, 1945, only 5 days after the tragedy, the local coroner's inquest officially ruled the fire an accident caused by faulty electrical wiring. The case was considered closed by authorities. The Sauters, numb with grief, even held a funeral service on January 2nd, 1946, though George and Jenny themselves were too heartbroken to attend. Their surviving children went without them, laying their siblings to rest in absentia. Yet in the days immediately following the fire, questions already began to gnaw at the edges of the official story. There were too many strange coincidences and unexplained details that troubled the Sauters and some townspeople. As the initial shock wore off, George and Jenny's sorrow turned into determination. They would not simply accept that their children had been reduced to ash, not without proof. And proof in this case was frustratingly absent. Within a week, George Sauter bulldozed 5 feet of dirt over the basement side of the house, turning it into a makeshift memorial garden for his lost children. He could not bear to see the charred ruin any longer. Unfortunately, this act, born of grief, also disturbed the scene and would complicate any later forensic examination. The state fire marshal's office had instructed him to leave the site untouched for investigation, but by the time state investigators arrived, the evidence was literally buried. The official conclusion of faulty wiring was reached quickly by the coroner's jury. Interestingly, one of the jurors was a man who had openly quarreled with George and even threatened him months earlier. In the small town grapevine, rumors started spreading that something was off about the whole incident. George Sauter, in quieter moments, began to recall details that didn't sit right. If the fire had been electrical in origin, why had the family's Christmas tree lights reportedly remained on during the early stages of the blaze? Normally, an electrical fire would have knocked out the power immediately, but witnesses remembered seeing the lights glowing while the house was still burning, until the flames devoured the wiring completely. That implied the fire was not started by an electrical fault, or at least not one that caused a short circuit right away. Then there was the matter of the telephone line. Initially, the Sauters assumed the phone had gone dead because fire destroyed the line, but a repairman inspected the lines and made a startling finding. The phone line had been cut, not burned. Someone had climbed up a 14-foot utility pole and snipped the wire on the night of the fire, deliberately isolating the Sauter house from calling out. A neighbor confirmed seeing a man up on a pole by the road that night who was stealing a block and tackle from the Sauter property and apparently cut the phone line to avoid detection. This man, named Lonnie Johnson, was later found and confessed to the theft and cutting the phone wire, but he denied any involvement in the fire itself. Was it a mere coincidence that a petty thief happened to sever their phone line on the same night their house went up in flames? And what about the ladder, so crucial and yet so elusive that night? A few days later, the family found their missing ladder tossed down a steep embankment 75 feet, 23 away from the house. Someone had moved it. Similarly, a mechanic would later testify that the likely reason George's trucks wouldn't start was that their engines had been tampered with. Perhaps the thief or an accomplice had drained the gas or removed an engine part when stealing the block and tackle in order to prevent the vehicles from being used during the fire. Piece by piece, the Sodders assembled these odd clues. The picture they painted was disturbing. It looked like someone had engineered a plan to trap the family, or at least the children, inside a burning house and to keep any rescue attempts from succeeding. Jenny Sodder, haunted by the lack of remains, conducted her own experiment. Skeptical of Chief Morris's claim that 5 bodies could be completely incinerated, she took small bones from the kitchen, chicken bones, pork bones, beef joints, and burned them in her wood stove and outdoors to see if fire would devour them. Each time after the flames died, she found charred bone fragments left behind. This supported what any professional crematorium could tell her. Even at 2,000 diksha for 2 hours, human bones do not entirely turn to ash. A local crematory employee confirmed that after hours in a retort, skeletal remains still exist, bones that require mechanical grinding to be fully pulverized. Yet the Sodder home had been obliterated in at most 45 minutes of burning. It seemed implausible to Jenny that all traces of 5 young bodies would vanish so completely in such a relatively brief house fire. Indeed, when the site was partially excavated years later, a few small shards of vertebrae were found in the soil, and those were determined by the Smithsonian Institution to have never been exposed to extreme heat, likely fragments from the fill dirt. The Smithsonian report on the case noted, "It is very strange that no other bones were found in the allegedly careful evacuation of the basement of the house. The absence of remains was hard to reconcile with a natural fire." Other unusual discoveries followed. Sylvia Sodder, the youngest child, found a curious object in the yard while the family was visiting the site, months after the fire. It was a small, hard, dark green rubber ball-like device. George, recalling Jenny's account of that loud thump on the roof and rolling noise, examined the object and concluded it looked like a pineapple bomb, a crude incendiary grenade similar to those used in warfare. In fact, a bus driver passing through Fayetteville late that Christmas Eve had reported seeing someone tossing balls of fire onto the Sodder house. The implication was chilling. The fire could have been deliberately set by throwing burning devices onto the roof, which then ignited the blaze. The noise Jenny heard might have been one of these bombs hitting the house. There was also the memory of a strange visitor in the weeks before Christmas. The Sodder children had noticed a man parked along US Highway 21, intently watching them as they returned from school. It was odd enough that they mentioned it to their parents. Around the same time, another man, a traveling insurance salesman, had come to the Sodder house trying to sell life insurance. When George declined, this salesman grew angry. "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed," he warned George. "You're going to pay for the dirty remarks you've been making about Mussolini." The threat was so outrageous that George didn't take it seriously at the time. After all, Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy, had been dead for over a year by then, executed in 1945, but George was known to be outspoken in his criticism of the late dictator. In the predominantly Italian immigrant community of Fayetteville, this had caused some friction. Not everyone appreciated George's harsh stance on Mussolini. Still, the idea that someone would harm his family over it felt far-fetched, at least before the fire. Now, with hindsight, that threat loomed large in George and Jenny's minds. Who was that salesman? Could he have been involved? Shockingly, as the Sodders dug deeper, they learned that the very same insurance salesman had served as a member of the coroner's jury that ruled the fire accidental. If true, this was a glaring conflict of interest. Essentially, a man who threatened their home was involved in affirming the official cause of its destruction. Yet he was never investigated by police. All these elements, the cut phone line, the missing ladder, tampered trucks, a possible incendiary device, ominous threats, pointed away from a simple accidental fire. By spring of 1946, George and Jenny Sodder no longer believed their children had died in a tragic freak fire. They began to voice an extraordinary theory. The fire was set as a diversion, and the 5 missing children had been kidnapped. In other words, someone wanted to harm George or retaliate against him. And rather than killing him directly, they took his children and burned his house as a cover for the abduction. If the children had been kidnapped, the Sodders wondered, why had none of them tried to contact their parents? Perhaps, the couple reasoned, they were being kept away or threatened. Over the years, dozens of tips and alleged sightings would fuel the Sodders' hope that their 5 children might still be alive. In the immediate aftermath of the fire, a few leads surfaced quickly. A woman claimed to have seen the children peering from a passing car while the fire was in progress. On that chaotic night, as the Sodder house burned, this woman said she saw unfamiliar children watching the flames from inside a speeding vehicle. Could the kidnappers have taken the children and driven by as a cruel taunt? At a rest stop between Fayetteville and Charleston, about 50 miles away, the morning after the fire, another woman reported serving breakfast to 5 children accompanied by 2 men and 2 women of Italian extraction, driving a car with Florida license plates. She remembered that the group arrived late at night and left at dawn. At the time, she hadn't known about the fire, but later recognized the children's photos in a newspaper. A hotel in Charleston, West Virginia. A few days later, a Charleston hotel clerk read a newspaper story about the tragedy. She recalled that 4 of the children, matching the Sodder kids' descriptions, had stayed at her hotel a week after the fire, with 4 adults, again described as 2 men and 2 women of Italian descent. In a statement given to police, she said, "The children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of Italian extraction. They registered about midnight. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the men appeared hostile. One of the men looked at me in a hostile manner. He turned and began talking rapidly in Italian. Immediately, the whole party stopped talking to me. They left early the next morning." This detailed account, citing specific behaviors and the fact the adults spoke Italian, added weight to the theory that if the children were taken, it could have been by someone within the Italian community, possibly even mafia-linked, given the Mussolini connection and threats. These reports were tantalizing but ultimately unverified. Authorities did not thoroughly follow up on them at the time. Skeptics noted inconsistencies or the possibility of mistaken identity. After all, many children were traveling with family during the holidays. Could these have been other kids? Yet to George and Jenny, such stories were lifelines. Each one suggested their children might have gotten out of that house alive. In 1947, as their suspicions grew into certainty, the Sodders appealed for outside help. George and Jenny wrote to the FBI, imploring them to investigate a possible kidnapping. Astonishingly, J. Edgar Hoover himself replied. The FBI director said he would like to assist, but since the case seemed local and there was no federal crime on the record, he lacked jurisdiction. Hoover added, however, that he would dispatch agents if local authorities gave permission. When the Sodders took this offer to the Fayetteville Police and Fire Departments, the officials refused to allow FBI intervention. It was another dead end. One can imagine the frustration and suspicion this caused. Why wouldn't the local authorities want the nation's top investigators to help on such a perplexing case? Denied official help, George and Jenny hired a private investigator named C. Tinsley. Tinsley doggedly pursued leads. He unearthed a bombshell secret. He learned that Fire Chief F.J. Morris claimed to have found human remains after all, specifically a human heart in the ashes, which he quietly hid in a dynamite box and buried at the scene. According to rumors Tinsley picked up, Morris confided this bizarre story to a local minister. If true, why would the chief hide evidence? The Sodders confronted Morris, who admitted that something had been buried at the site. Together, they dug up the box. Inside was a mysterious fleshy lump. They took it to a funeral director who examined it and concluded it was actually a beef liver, untouched by fire. It had never been exposed to heat or flame. Confronted with this, Chief Morris shamefacedly confessed to others, if not directly to the Sodders, that he had indeed planted the liver in the rubble, hoping to placate the family by producing some remains. Morris apparently thought if the Sodders found a piece of something, they'd be convinced the children truly died and would stop their inquiries. This deception only further eroded the Sodders' trust in the authorities. Investigator Tinsley also discovered more about the threatening insurance salesman. It turned out this man had once been employed by George, and curiously, he was a co-signer on George's insurance policies. In fact, without George's knowledge, this individual had recently increased the coverage on the Sodder home from $1,500 to $1,750. Why would a former employee secretly adjust George's insurance? Was he anticipating something? Moreover, recall that this same man sat on the coroner's jury, declaring the fire accidental. The entanglement of personal grudges, insurance, and the fire's investigation was deeply unsettling to the Sodders. The private detective's work reinforced the Sodders' belief that they were contending with a conspiracy or cover-up. And if that was so, their children's fate hung in an agonizing uncertainty. Either they had been killed and the crime hidden, or they were alive somewhere, perhaps in danger or unable to contact home. George Sodder vowed to never give up looking. By the early 1950s, the Sodders had transformed their quest into a public campaign for answers. They printed flyers with the children's pictures and offered a $5,000 reward, a huge sum at the time, later doubled to $10,000, for any information leading to closure. In 1952, they put up a large billboard along Route 16 near the site of their former home. Passers-by for miles around would see the 5 dark-haired, solemn-eyed faces of Maurice, Martha, Louie, Jenny, and Betty, with an anguished question printed beneath. What was their fate? Kidnapped, murdered, or are they still alive? The billboard also recounted the basic facts of the case and the lingering questions, essentially accusing the authorities of a rush to judgment. This bold move kept the case in the public eye and became a local landmark. For 37 years, that billboard stood, from 1952 until Jenny Sauter's death in 1989, a testament to the family's unwavering hope and grief. It was, as one observer noted, a haunting daily reminder of the tragedy for the entire town. Leads continued to trickle in. The Sauters would chase down every rumor. George traveled to New York City, to Houston, to small towns in Florida. Anywhere someone reported a sighting of children that could be theirs. Once, George became convinced that a young girl in a New York school photo was his missing daughter, Betty. The resemblance was uncanny. He drove all the way to Manhattan to find the child, but her parents refused to speak to him. Another time, someone in Texas claimed a bar patron had bragged about being one of the missing Sauter boys. George went out to track that lead too, only to find it fizzled into nothing. George's health began to suffer as he relentlessly pursued every whisper. Right before my grandfather died, my dad took him to Texas to follow up on a lead, said the Sauter's granddaughter decades later. He was very sick, and it didn't pan out. They literally turned around and drove back, empty-handed. The emotional toll was immense. In 1967, over 20 years after the fire, Jenny Sauter received an envelope in the mail with no return address, postmarked Central City, Kentucky. Inside was a photograph of a young man around 30 years old. On the back, a handwritten note read, "Louis Sauter, I love brother Frankie. Elil boys, A901 32 or 35. The man in the picture had dark, curly hair and a strong resemblance to Louis, who was 9 in 1945 and would be in his 30s if alive in 1967. The cryptic message was maddeningly inconclusive, but the Sauter family felt this could truly be Louis. They hired another private detective to go to Kentucky and investigate this lead. Tragically, that detective vanished and never reported back. The Sauters were unable to locate him at all. It was another mystery layered onto their saga. Nevertheless, the photo gave them a surge of hope. They added it to the billboard, enlarging the portrait of the man, but notably left out the details of the postmark, fearing that if Louis was alive and someone had tried to hide him, any public hint might put him in danger. The Sauters quietly contacted one of Louis's childhood friends to ask if he thought the photo resembled Louis. He agreed it did. To Jenny, the mother, this was perhaps the most tangible evidence she ever received that at least one of her missing children might still be out there. Time, however, was against them. George Sauter died in 1969 without ever learning what really happened that terrible night. Jenny, forever clad in black mourning clothes, continued tending the memorial garden at the old home site, living in a house nearby and keeping the billboard updated. She lived until 1989, passing away at age 85, still without answers. Only after Jenny's death was the weathered billboard finally taken down. Of the original Sauter siblings, Sylvia, the baby who survived, lived the longest. She grew up, married, and had children of her own, and became the keeper of the family's story. Sylvia vowed to her parents that she would never let the world forget about her missing brothers and sisters. Well into the 2000s, she and her children continued to publicize the case, joining discussions on online forums and cooperating with television programs that revisited the mystery. She experienced their grief for a long time, Sylvia's daughter said of her mother's lifelong quest. Sylvia herself maintained until her death in 2021 that she believed her siblings survived that night. Over 7 decades have passed since the Christmas Eve fire that destroyed the Sauter home, yet the case remains one of American history's most enduring and haunting unsolved mysteries. It continues to captivate true crime followers and paranormal sleuths alike, precisely because it sits at the intersection of a tragic family story and a puzzle with unsettling implications. Broadly, theories about what truly happened fall into 2 camps. 1. The children died in the fire. The simplest explanation, and the official one, is that the 5 children did die in the house fire, and circumstances merely made it appear mysterious. Modern fire experts have offered possible reasons why no remains were found. One local firefighter, Steve Cruikshank, noted that George Sauter had stored several 55-gallon drums of gasoline in his basement for his trucking business. If those ruptured or ignited, the fire's heat could have been far more intense than a normal house fire. Then, when George bulldozed soil over the site so soon after, just days later, he inadvertently insulated the hot embers under the dirt, creating an effect like an oven that might have cremated bones over time. In other words, by smothering the fire remains with dirt, the family may have unknowingly aided the destruction of evidence. Additionally, some point out that the search in 1945 was hasty and not expertly done. The volunteer firefighters might have missed or even accidentally destroyed fragile bone fragments. John, the oldest Sauter son, eventually came to accept this view. He would later insist the family should move on, believing his siblings did die there and that no good came from poking at the embers of that tragedy. Some locals and researchers agree, suggesting that while there were oddities, none conclusively prove a kidnapping. Journalist Stacey Horn, who investigated the case for NPR, said, "Weirdness does not necessarily equal murder," meaning strange coincidences happen, especially in the chaos of a fire. She acknowledged the genuine weirdness in the Sauter case, but still felt the children likely perished that night. Her stance is that it's the simplest and most plausible scenario, unless new evidence indicates otherwise. 2. The children were abducted. The Sauter family themselves firmly believed this until their dying days. They, and many who sympathize with them, argue that too many things had to go wrong simultaneously by chance for the death by fire theory to sit right. Cut phone lines, stolen ladders, disabled trucks, explicit threats, a possible incendiary device, and multiple eyewitness sightings of the children afterwards suggest a coordinated effort. The motive most often cited is revenge or retribution against George Sauter. Being a vocal anti-fascist in a community with several pro-Mussolini neighbors might have earned him enemies. Some speculate that the Sicilian mafia or other criminal elements could have been involved, perhaps trying to extort money from George by kidnapping his kids. One theory is that someone George trusted lured the children outside to safety with a promise, which might explain why they didn't cry out from inside the house. Then the house was set ablaze as a distraction. The children could have been whisked away, possibly even back to Italy, to be raised or sold, and kept from contacting home under threat. Supporters of this theory point to the peculiar consistency of the eyewitness accounts. Multiple people independently described Italian-looking adults with the children, lending credence to an abduction by Italian associates. Additionally, none of the surviving Sauter family heard screams or cries from the 5 children during the fire, which is unusual if they were trapped inside. It hints that maybe those children were not in the house as it burned. Over the years, no conclusive evidence of the Sodder children living secret lives elsewhere ever surfaced. But believers in the abduction theory argue that silence could be enforced. If the children were told that contacting their family would result in harm to their siblings or parents, they might indeed have stayed hidden to protect those they loved. If they survived and knew George and Jenny were alive, maybe they avoided contact to keep the family safe, this theory suggests. Between these two poles, the Sodder case has inspired countless debates. It even prompted comparisons to other mysterious fires where victims' bodies were unaccounted for. In 2005, an NPR segment revisiting the case brought it to a new generation, and in 2022, the History Channel featured it on History's Greatest Mysteries. Each time, the old evidence is re-examined, but the conclusion remains elusive. What is universally agreed is the emotional core of this story. A family shattered on Christmas Day, torn between grief and the refusal to give up hope. It's something that resonates with people, said the Sodders' granddaughter, Jenny Henthorne, in a recent interview, because it wasn't a single child. It was such a large part of the family, and it was at such a tragic time. Christmas. The Sodder children mystery strikes a chord of deepest pity. The idea of 5 innocent children lost without a trace, and parents who spend their lives searching. It underscores how, sometimes, the not knowing can be more haunting than any certainty. To this day, on quiet winter nights in Fayetteville, some old-timers say you can still feel the presence of that terrible Christmas long ago. Perhaps it's the memory carried by the community, or perhaps something more ghostly. The spot on Route 16 where the billboard once stood is just an empty patch now, but those who recall it can still see the faded photographs in their mind's eye. The story of the Sodder children has become a kind of local legend, cautioning against complacency, urging vigilance, eliciting empathy. The Sodder family's tragedy remains unsolved. It is a story with no true ending, only a legacy of questions. Was it an accident or an elaborate crime? If it was arson and abduction, who was responsible, and what became of the children? Each possibility is as chilling as the other. Either 5 young lives were erased without a trace in an inferno, or they were spirited away into an unknown fate. As one commentator aptly said, in this case, logic tells you they probably did burn up, but you can't always go by logic. And as another noted, if someday it is learned that the children did not die in the fire, I won't be shocked. On that December night in 1945, the Sodders went to bed full of holiday joy, utterly unaware of the dark events about to unfold. In the span of a few hours, their world was irreparably broken. Yet, through the ensuing decades, their love for their lost children fueled an unwavering quest for the truth. The case of the Sodder children is not just a true crime mystery, it is also a tale of parental devotion and the enduring hope that refuses to die, even when confronted with the most nightmarish uncertainty. As we finish this story, perhaps the most haunting aspect is imagining those 5 children frozen in time, forever young in photographs, smiling softly in sepia tone on an old billboard, while the question of their fate hangs unanswered like an echo in the Appalachian hills. The Sodder family's Christmas mystery remains, drifting through time like smoke from a long-quenched fire, unresolved, but never forgotten. This next story takes us in the rural calm of Carnation, Washington, a small town about 25 miles east of Seattle. The Christmas season usually brings quiet nights and the soft glow of lights in farmhouse windows. On Christmas Eve 2007, one such home at the end of a wooded lane held the promise of a warm family gathering. Wayne and Judy Anderson, a couple in their early 60s, were preparing to host their adult children for the holiday. Judy was in a back room, carefully wrapping last-minute gifts, while Wayne relaxed in the living room. Outside, a light winter chill settled over the 5-acre property, and all seemed peaceful. However, the tranquility of that evening was about to be shattered in a way no one could have imagined. The Andersons' 29-year-old daughter, Michelle, arrived that afternoon with her boyfriend, Joseph McEnroe, also 29. Unbeknownst to Wayne and Judy, the young couple had armed themselves and harbored dark intentions. Michelle felt deeply resentful toward her family. She believed her older brother Scott owed her money, and she was angry at her parents for pressuring her to pay rent for living in a trailer on their property. In her mind, these grievances had festered. She reportedly told detectives that if these conflicts weren't resolved on December 24th, her intent was definitely to kill everybody. With Michelle's simmering anger hidden behind a tense smile, the couple stepped into her parents' cozy home. The smell of dinner and pine hung in the air. Tiny decorative lights twinkled on a Christmas tree in the corner. For a moment, nothing seemed amiss. But then, Michelle quietly drew a handgun. In the soft light of that Christmas Eve, she aimed at her father. Click. Her weapon jammed. Wayne looked up in confusion at the sudden sound. In the heartbeat of hesitation that followed, Joseph calmly raised his own pistol. A single gunshot cracked the silence. Wayne Anderson, 60, fell to the floor, fatally shot before he could understand what was happening. At the sound of gunfire, Judy Anderson, 61, came running from the back room, panic in her eyes. She saw her husband on the floor and her daughter armed. Before she could flee or cry for help, Joseph turned the gun on Judy. In a chillingly gentle tone, he whispered, "I'm sorry," then shot her as well. Judy collapsed amid the scattered wrapping paper and ribbons she'd been tending to just moments before. In a span of seconds, the Anderson parents lay lifeless on their own living room floor. The house that had been filled with anticipation for the holiday was now eerily quiet. Michelle and Joseph dragged Wayne and Judy's bodies out of sight, out to a shed on the property, and hurried to clean up any signs of violence. They wiped down surfaces and mopped up blood with towels and old carpets, trying to erase what they had done. Outside, daylight was fading. In the silence that followed, the couple waited. They knew that soon others would arrive. It was to be a family Christmas Eve gathering, and Michelle's brother was expected. Rather than remorse, the two seemed steeled with grim purpose. They retreated into the dim edges of the house, guns loaded, bracing for the next act of their deadly plan. Not long after, headlights cut through the early winter darkness as Scott Anderson, 32, pulled up to his parents' home with his wife Erica, also 32, and their 2 young children, Olivia and Nathan. What should have been a joyful family reunion instantly descended into horror. As Scott stepped inside the house, Michelle emerged from the shadows with her gun raised. She confronted her older brother over their long-standing grievances, perhaps a final, furious attempt to justify what she was about to do. Scott's face must have registered shock and disbelief. In that fraught moment, he lunged toward his sister, trying to disarm her or stop her. But Michelle pulled the trigger. She shot Scott multiple times, the gunfire flashing in the dark entryway. Scott crumpled to the floor. His wife Erica screamed as the night erupted in chaos. Joseph McEnroe stepped forward to back up Michelle, and Erica Anderson found herself staring down the barrel of a gun. In the frenzy, shots rang out again. Erica was struck twice and collapsed, wounded but still conscious. Summoning unimaginable courage, Erica managed to crawl over a couch toward a cordless phone on a side table. With trembling hands, she dialed 911, hoping the call would bring help in time. In a nearby room, 5-year-old Olivia clung to her 3-year-old brother Nathan, frightened by the deafening blasts and the sight of their parents being attacked. For a few precious seconds, a 911 dispatcher on the other end heard only muffled noises, the commotion of what sounded like an argument or a party, before the line went dead. Joseph had ripped the phone from Erica's grasp, tearing out the batteries and smashing the receiver to ensure no help would come. Bleeding and desperate, Erica huddled on the floor with her children. She looked up at Joseph, her eyes pleading in the dim light. Voice shaking, she begged, "You don't have to do this." Little Olivia and Nathan were pressed against their mother, crying. Joseph's face was cold and resolute as he replied softly, "Yes, we do." In the next moments, he raised his pistol and fired the fatal shot at Erica. The mother's pleas fell silent. What happened next was an act of unspeakable cruelty. Not wanting any witnesses, Michelle insisted that they could not spare the children. Joseph turned his gun on Olivia, 5, ending her short life, and then on Nathan, 3, killing the toddler as well. In a blink, 3 generations of the Anderson family were gone. 6 lives brutally snuffed out on what should have been the most peaceful night of the year. In the immediate aftermath, an eerie stillness fell over the Anderson home. The only sounds were the crackle of the fireplace and the quiet hum of Christmas lights, now casting a tragic glow over empty rooms. Michelle and Joseph stood amid the ruin of a family, their clothes stained, their ears ringing from gunfire. They had done the unthinkable. Yet their plan was not complete. As the reality of 6 bodies lay in and around the house, the 2 made a hasty decision. They fled the property, locking the front gate behind them, and drove away into the night. Unknown to the killers, Erica's brief 911 call had not gone entirely unheard. The disconnected call prompted police dispatchers to send officers to check the Anderson residence around 8:30 p.m. that Christmas Eve. Moments later, a patrol car rolled up the gravel drive, headlights sweeping over the gated entrance. The gate was closed and secured with a chain, something not unusual in rural properties, especially after dark. Through the fence, the house appeared dark and still. The deputies had no clear sign of distress. The muffled chaos heard by dispatch was tragically misinterpreted as possible background noise from a holiday gathering. Finding the gate locked and seeing nothing amiss from the road, the officers turned back into the night, unaware that just beyond that gate lay a gruesome scene and a 911 call for help that had nearly reached them. Meanwhile, Michelle and Joseph drove aimlessly, leaving Carnation behind as the weight of what they'd done settled in. They first headed north toward the Canadian border, perhaps considering escape. At some point, they changed course and drove south toward Oregon, a cold, quiet highway unfolding before them on Christmas Day. Ultimately, they arrived nowhere in particular. By December 26th, low on options and unable to undo their crimes, the pair decided to return to Carnation. They concocted a story to appear innocent. They would pretend to stumble upon the murder scene and act as shocked survivors discovering the carnage. That morning, back in Carnation, the Andersons' closest friends grew worried. It wasn't like Judy to miss work without calling, especially not on December 26th, the busy day after Christmas. Linda Thiele, Judy's best friend and co-worker, felt a gnawing sense that something was wrong. Around midday, Linda drove out to the Anderson property. The world was still coated in holiday calm, a dusting of frost on the fields, decorations still hanging on quiet houses. As Linda approached the Anderson home, she sensed the silence. No smoke from the chimney, no voices or movement. She knocked on the door, no answer. With growing dread, Linda peered through a window and recoiled at the sight inside. On the living room floor lay what looked like two bodies in a pool of blood. Overcome with shock, Linda scrambled back and dialed 911, her heart pounding. Help was finally on the way. Police and King County sheriffs, detectives arrived swiftly and entered the Anderson home, now a frozen tableau of horror. The investigators found 4 bodies inside, Scott and Erica near the living room, and little Olivia and Nathan not far from their mother. Outside, they soon discovered Wayne and Judy's bodies in the shed where they had been dragged and hidden. The scene was devastating. Presents still sitting unopened under the Christmas tree, holiday decorations looking on in silence, and an entire family wiped out. Seasoned detectives murmured that it was the worst crime they'd ever witnessed in the community. As crime scene teams began their grim work, a car slowly approached the property. It was Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe, returning as they had planned, trying to look casual. By now, the Anderson home was an active crime scene. Flashing lights, police tape, and officers everywhere. Strangely, Michelle and Joseph walked up without urgent questions or visible distress. They did not ask the officers, "What happened? Is everyone okay?" Their lack of concern immediately raised red flags for the investigators. Detectives on site noted the couple's flat affect and odd calm, suspicions growing. They brought Michelle and Joseph in for questioning. Separated and pressed by investigators, the facade quickly crumbled. Within hours, both Michelle and Joseph confessed to the murders. They described in chilling detail how the massacre unfolded, from the initial shots to the final moments. Michelle's anger toward her family, over money, over feeling stepped on, had boiled over into a murder plot. She admitted she had even attempted to resolve those grudges on Christmas Eve, but was ready to kill if she didn't get her way. When confronted with the reality of shooting her own parents, brother, sister-in-law, and niece and nephew, Michelle remained cold and emotionless. Joseph, too, recounted the events, claiming he went along with the plan out of a twisted sense of loyalty to Michelle. In a matter-of-fact tone, he acknowledged apologizing to some of his victims, a macabre politeness, before pulling the trigger. The investigators listened, astonished at the brutality and lack of remorse. The Carnation Christmas Eve massacre, as the media would come to call it, was solved within 2 days of its discovery. But the road to justice was only beginning. News of the Anderson family murders sent shockwaves through Washington and the nation. The story of a daughter and her boyfriend annihilating an entire family on Christmas Eve was so unthinkable, it made headlines far and wide. In the tight-knit Carnation community, population just over 2,000, grief and disbelief hung heavy in the air. Candlelight vigils were held in memory of the 6 victims, as neighbors struggled to comprehend how such evil could hide behind the face of someone they knew. Wayne and Judy Anderson had been well-liked, ordinary folks. Scott and Erica were remembered as loving parents devoted to little Olivia and Nathan. Now, photos of their smiling faces adorned makeshift memorials, surrounded by flowers and stuffed animals in the cold December light. Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe were arrested and charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder each. Prosecutors initially announced they would seek the death penalty for both, given the heinous nature of the crime. Years of pre-trial maneuvering followed. The legal process was painfully slow, delayed by questions of Michelle's mental state, changes in defense attorneys, and the sheer magnitude of evidence to be sorted. Meanwhile, Washington State's death penalty was put under a moratorium by the governor in 2014, pausing any executions. The trial finally commenced nearly 8 years later, bringing a measure of resolution to the case. Joseph McEnroe's trial came first. In March 2015, he was found guilty on all 6 counts of aggravated murder. The jury had to decide whether he would face execution or spend life in prison. Ultimately, they spared him the death penalty. Jurors cited his evident remorse during certain parts of the trial and the changing attitudes toward capital punishment, along with the state's moratorium, as reasons to opt for life in prison. 2 months later, in May 2015, McEnroe was formally sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At his sentencing, there were tears in the courtroom. Family members of Judy, Wayne, and the others spoke of forgiveness and loss. Joseph, in a quiet voice, apologized for what he had done, though many found his words hollow. The following year, in early 2016, Michelle Anderson finally faced her own trial. She showed little emotion as prosecutors laid out the cold, methodical way she executed her family out of petty resentment. In March 2016, a jury likewise found her guilty on all counts of murder. Given the previous outcome for Joseph, prosecutors dropped their push for a death sentence. In April 2016, Michelle Anderson was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms, ensuring she will never walk free again. As the judge delivered the sentence, he remarked on the incomprehensible breach of trust and the depth of betrayal a crime like this represents. Michelle offered no apology. She simply stared ahead, a blank expression on her face, as the courtroom looked on in somber silence. Now picture the Anderson family home as it might appear today. The house sits quiet and empty, tucked among tall evergreens under the winter sky. Perhaps there's a light snowfall covering the old porch and the bare branches of the yard. If you peek through the windows, you'd see faint outlines of where life once flourished. An empty living room where a Christmas tree may have stood, a silent kitchen that once smelled of holiday cooking. It's a place forever marked by what occurred, yet with time it has been reclaimed by quiet and nature. The tragedy of that Christmas Eve in 2007 stands as a somber reminder that even in seasons of joy, darkness can intrude without warning. As you breathe softly now, consider the fragility of those moments. One day a family was exchanging gifts and laughter. The next only echoes remained. Yet even the darkest night eventually gives way to dawn. In the years since, the community of Carnation has continued on, carrying the memory of the Andersons in their hearts. The immense grief has gradually transformed into quiet remembrance. In your own life, you may notice how light and darkness coexist, how sorrow and comfort are intertwined like the night sky scattered with stars. Let the image of that lonely farmhouse fade gently in your mind. There is no need to hold on to the pain of this story. The tale has been told, justice has been served, and the spirits of the lost can be at peace. Now it's time to let go of the details, like watching snow cover the harsh edges of a landscape, softening everything. Feel the weight of this true story easing off your shoulders with each exhale. You are safe, here and now. The past cannot reach you. All that remains is the cool hush of a winter's night and the steady beating of your heart. Allow yourself to drift in this safe stillness. Imagine each breath drawing in calm and each exhale releasing any lingering tension or sadness. The world outside is quiet. The only thing you need to do is rest. In this moment, there's nothing to fix and nothing more to know. The story, as sorrowful as it is, can be set down now. Let it all become distant, like a faint star on the horizon of your mind. Whenever you're ready, you can close your eyes and surrender to the pull of sleep. Let the soft music and the silence between thoughts carry you. The night is deep and gentle around you. Feel the peace in knowing that even after the darkest experiences, stillness and comfort can be found again. Now we move over to a quiet Christmas day in 1929. A haunting silence fell over a rural farm in Stokes County, North Carolina. The gentle hush of winter had settled on the Lawson family homestead, where a humble tobacco farmer, Charlie Lawson, lived with his wife and 7 children. For the Lawsons, as for many families, Christmas morning should have been filled with warmth. The crackle of the hearth, children's laughter, and the soft melodies of carols in the air. But this Christmas would be different. In the pale December light, an unspeakable darkness was gathering. Before the day was done, the Lawson family story would turn from holiday celebration to one of the most shocking tragedies in North Carolina's history. It began innocently enough. Just days earlier, Charlie Lawson had surprised everyone by taking his family into town for an uncommon treat: new outfits and a professional portrait. In the sepia-tone photograph, the family stands stiff and unsmiling. Parents and children dressed in their Sunday best, gazing into the camera. Such an expense was unusual for a working-class farming family. Neighbors would later recall their surprise at the outing. Some wondered if Charlie had planned something dire all along, wanting one last family picture. Yet in that moment, nothing seemed obviously amiss. The Lawson children, from 17-year-old Marie to 4-month-old Mary Lou, clutched their new coats against the winter chill, perhaps excited by the bustling stores and holiday decorations in town. Charlie himself was quiet, a 43-year-old father carrying unspoken burdens. If there was any sign of the storm to come, It hid behind his distant eyes in that family portrait. December 25th, 1929 dawned cold and clear. The Lawsons' wooden farmhouse sat amid barren tobacco fields, a dusting of frost on the ground. Inside, the aroma of a cake baking, Marie's special Christmas treat, mingled with the scent of pine boughs decorating the home. For a while, the day proceeded like a normal Christmas. The children's voices echoed through the yard as two of the Lawson girls, Carrie, 12, and Maybelle, 7, got ready to walk to their aunt and uncle's house nearby. Charlie Lawson watched them leave, his breath hanging in the icy air as he followed at a distance with a shotgun in hand. At the tobacco barn on the edge of the property, the first gunshots rang out. Charlie had been lying in wait. He raised his 12-gauge shotgun and shot Carrie and Maybelle from behind the barn as they came within range. The crack of the firearm cut through the still afternoon. Both young girls fell to the cold ground. Charlie approached and, in a grim, methodical act, bludgeoned them to ensure they were dead. Gently, almost tenderly, he placed their lifeless bodies inside the tobacco-curing barn, arms crossed over their chests and pillows of rocks under their heads, a bizarre semblance of care in the wake of violence. Back at the farmhouse, 37-year-old Fanny Lawson had been sitting on the front porch, perhaps startled by the distant gunshot. As she stood, Charlie emerged from the trees and shot his wife point blank. Fanny collapsed on the porch where moments earlier she'd been enjoying the holiday. The sudden blast sent a shockwave through the remaining children inside. Marie, 17, screamed from within the house, alarmed by the gunfire and her mother's fate. In a desperate panic, James, 4, and Raymond, 2, the two little boys, attempted to hide, tiny figures scrambling for safety as their world turned upside down. Charlie entered the home with a slow, deliberate tread. He found Marie in the living area and shot her next, silencing her cries. Then he discovered the two young boys, trembling in their hiding spot, and ended their lives as well in the same brutal fashion. In the sudden stillness after the gunshots, a dreadful quiet enveloped the farmhouse. But one more life remained. In a crib, baby Mary Lou, just 4 months old, began to wail, perhaps awakened by the noise or sensing the terror in the air. What happened next is almost too cruel to comprehend. Charlie Lawson took the life of his infant daughter, Mary Lou. It's believed he bludgeoned the baby to death, the shotgun's devastation being too extreme for such a small victim. In a matter of minutes, the Lawson family home, once filled with laughter and the promise of a new morning, had become a scene of almost unimaginable horror. With chilling composure, Charlie proceeded to tenderly position each of his slain family members. He crossed their arms over their chests and placed rocks or pillows under their heads as if arranging them for eternal rest. On the kitchen table, Marie's freshly baked Christmas cake remained untouched, a bittersweet symbol of the day's normalcy turned tragedy. The only member of the Lawson household not accounted for was 16-year-old Arthur, the eldest son, whom Charlie had deliberately spared by sending him on an errand that morning. Arthur was not at home when the killing began, a fact that saved his life. One can only imagine the dread and confusion that must have overtaken him when he returned to find his entire family dead. Having exterminated his family, Charlie Lawson fled into the nearby woods behind the house. The winter sun was dipping low, casting long shadows through the barren trees as he paced among the pines and hardwoods. He was armed still, the shotgun in his hands, and carried with him the weight of what he had just done. Neighbors, alerted by the gunshots or by Arthur's cries for help, cautiously approached the Lawson house as dusk fell. They were met with the ghastly sight inside, a tableau of death on what should have been a joyous day. Word of the massacre spread quickly through the rural community, and soon a small crowd gathered near the farm, their Christmas day shattered by the unthinkable news. Some townspeople and law enforcement officers arrived and began to secure the gruesome scene. Meanwhile, they knew the killer was at large in the darkening woods, armed and possibly intent on more violence. Men called out warily for Charlie, but heard no reply. Instead, from the shadows among the trees came the crunch of leaves under a pacing foot. Charlie was circling a large tree not far from his home, trudging through the fallen leaves in an endless loop. Witnesses would later surmise that he'd been out there for hours, trudging in circles with his thoughts, as footprints in the snow and dirt showed an eerie path worn around the tree trunk. Then, at roughly 5:12 p.m., a single crack of the shotgun echoed across the farmstead, its sound carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. Those nearby froze. The source of the sound came from the woods, and everyone knew what it meant. When officers hurried toward the noise, they found Charlie Lawson's body lying on the cold ground. He had taken his own life with one final gunshot through the heart, ending the rampage in suicidal resolution. The nightmare had concluded as abruptly as it began, with Charlie's lifeless form at the base of the tree he had paced around in his final moments. In his pockets were 2 notes scrawled on scraps of paper, muddled messages that read, "Trouble can cause," and "No one to blame." Fragments that only deepened the mystery of his motive. The dark Christmas day was finally silent, save for the soft sobbing of neighbors and the distant cry of the wind through the pines. The shock of the Lawson family murders sent tremors far beyond Stokes County. News traveled fast. By the next day, December 26th, headlines across the country relayed the grisly story of a father annihilating his family on Christmas. In an era long before 24-hour news, the Lawson murders nonetheless became a nationwide sensation, striking at the heart of the ideal of holiday togetherness turned to tragedy. Curious outsiders and grieving locals alike flocked to the Lawson farm in morbid fascination. In the days following the murders, thousands of people tramped through the yard, peering into windows and attempting to glimpse the site of the horror. The blood-stained floors where the family fell became a macabre attraction, and state police had to be stationed to keep order. Amid the chaos, 16-year-old Arthur Lawson, the sole surviving son, was left to grapple with unbearable grief. On the day he should have been celebrating with siblings, he instead found himself attending their funerals. A few days after Christmas, the coffins of Charlie, Fanny, and their children were lined up side by side, and a crowd of mourners gathered around the family's graves. Heartbroken and orphaned, Arthur stood as chief mourner, bidding farewell to his mother, father, and 6 siblings in one agonizing ceremony. In a decision that raised eyebrows, Charlie Lawson was buried in the same grave plot as the family members he had murdered. A single mass grave holds them together, victims and killer united in death. The headstone, which still stands, bears a haunting epitaph. Not now, but in the coming years, it will be a better land. We'll read the meaning of our tears, and then sometime we'll understand. Those words, taken from an old hymn, seemed to offer a longing for answers, a hope that with time, the pain of this loss might make sense or find resolution beyond this life. In the weeks that followed, Charlie's brother, Marion Lawson, took an astonishing step. Perhaps unable to reckon with the financial cost of the funerals or driven by the heir's fascination with the crime, Marion opened the Lawson home as a public tourist attraction. For 25 cents, curiosity seekers could walk through the preserved crime scene. To some, this was a ghoulish spectacle. To others, it is a way to pay respects or simply attempt to comprehend the incomprehensible. Inside the house, visitors found that many objects were left exactly as they were on Christmas Day. Most poignant of all was Marie's Christmas cake, still sitting on the sideboard. The cake, baked on the morning of the tragedy, became a morbid centerpiece. At first, it sat uncovered, but as the flood of visitors continued, tour-goers began picking at the cake, pocketing raisins as grim souvenirs of the murder site. In response, Marion placed the cake under a glass dome to protect it from the prying fingers of relic hunters. For years, that cake stood on display in the blood-stained house, a decaying symbol of a holiday that had curdled into horror. This peculiar museum of death drew hundreds of people. They shuffled through the quiet rooms where the scent of gunpowder and blood had long faded, replaced by dust and the sweet mustiness of the preserved cake. Outside, they viewed the tobacco barn where the first shots were fired, and the path into the woods where Charlie's life ended. The Lawson farm had become an early example of dark tourism, a place where tragedy occurred and people visit to reflect on mortality and evil. While many locals found this distasteful, others took it as a cautionary pilgrimage. In whispers, visitors would talk about the possible reasons. Why did he do it? As they peered at the very bed where baby Mary Lou last lay. In the absence of a clear motive, Charlie left no full explanation, only cryptic notes. Speculation and rumor filled the void. Over time, two leading theories emerged to explain why a seemingly ordinary father would slaughter his family on Christmas Day. Mental breakdown or injury. A few months before the murders, Charlie Lawson had suffered a head injury while working on the farm. Some relatives later wondered if this trauma altered his personality or sanity, possibly sparking a latent madness. However, an autopsy of Charlie's brain at Johns Hopkins Hospital found no abnormalities or obvious damage. Nothing medically conclusive explained the massacre. Still, friends noted that Charlie had been behaving oddly in the weeks leading up to Christmas, withdrawn, agitated, as if wrestling with internal demons. Dark family secret, incest. Decades after the tragedy, a shocking allegation came to light. In 1990, a relative broke a long-held silence. Charlie's own niece, Stella Lawson, revealed a family secret. Stella claimed that at the funeral in 1929, she overheard her mother and other women whispering that Fanny, Charlie's wife, had suspected an incestuous relationship between Charlie and their eldest daughter, Marie. According to Stella, Fanny confided that she had discovered her husband sexually abusing 17-year-old Marie, and that this horrible knowledge weighed on her in the days before Christmas. Even more startling, one of Marie's close friends, Ella May, later corroborated that Marie had disclosed she was pregnant and that the baby was her own father's. Marie allegedly told her friend that both she and her mother were aware of this unspeakable situation. If true, Charlie Lawson faced impending disgrace and the collapse of the world he knew. Family acquaintances recounted that Charlie had warned his daughter, perhaps in a moment of panic, that if she told anyone about the pregnancy, there would be some killing done. It's a chilling statement, supposedly from Charlie's own lips, that in hindsight sounds like a dire prophecy. These incest revelations, while never officially proven in court or investigation, have become the most commonly cited explanation for the Lawson murders. The theory suggests that Charlie Lawson, unwilling to face the public shame of his abuse being exposed, chose to eliminate his entire family and himself to cover up the crime. Perhaps in his tormented logic, he thought this was the only way to erase the sin, a final act of control steeped in blood. If true, it cast the family portrait outing in a more sinister light. Was Charlie commemorating the family he knew he was about to destroy? The stony expressions in the photograph, particularly Marie's somber face and Charlie's stern, sidelong gaze, seemed to hint at a terrible burden behind the camera's flash. It's as if the secret was preserved in that frame, visible only to those who knew where to look. Even with these theories, no one can say with absolute certainty why Charlie Lawson snapped on that Christmas day. The case file closed with more questions than answers. In the wake of the massacre, Arthur Lawson tried to move on, carrying the Lawson name forward. He married in the 1930s and started a family of his own, but tragedy shadowed him as well. In 1945, at just 32 years old, Arthur died in a sudden motor accident. It seemed the grim fate of the Lawsons was complete. No immediate member of that family lived beyond mid-century, yet the story of the Lawson family refused to fade away. In the years and decades that followed, it took on an almost folkloric life. Songs and ballads were written, carrying the tale to listeners who had never set foot in North Carolina. One notable bluegrass tune, "The Murder of the Lawson Family," was recorded in 1930, just months after the incident, ensuring the tragedy became part of Appalachian lore. It was later covered by the Stanley Brothers in 1956, their mournful harmonies recounting the grisly deed and the sorrow of that Christmas day. Beyond music, books and documentaries delved into the case, from the 1990 expose White Christmas, Bloody Christmas, that first publicized the incest theory, to later works like The Meaning of Our Tears, titled after the inscription on the Lawson graves. The Lawson murders have been examined on true crime podcasts and even a paranormal Netflix series, cementing their place in the pantheon of America's most haunting holiday crimes. Locals say that on cold December nights, the old Lawson homestead, the house long since demolished, still feels touched by the horror that happened there. Rumors of ghosts persist. Some claim a figure of a man can be seen pacing near the tree line, or that faint strains of a Christmas carol echo in the distance on the anniversary night. Such tales, true or not, reflect how deeply this tragedy scarred the collective memory. Today, nearly a century later, the Lawson family tragedy remains a cautionary tale wrapped in enigma. The countryside where their farm stood has changed with time, and nothing physical remains of the blood-stained house that once attracted throngs of curiosity seekers. But the story endures, told and retold whenever talk turns to the darkest events ever to mar the Christmas season. Listeners still shudder at the idea of a father methodically killing his wife and children on the very day meant for love and peace, It forces one to confront unsettling questions. How could someone harbor such darkness behind a facade of normalcy? How do we reconcile the image of a family gathered around a Christmas tree with the image of that same family lying lifeless in their home? In an odd way, the Lawson murders have given rise to moments of unity and reflection. Every retelling is accompanied by a quiet sense of grief for the victims and even perhaps a glimmer of pity for a man who must have been deeply broken to commit such acts. Communities have used the tale as a reminder to watch for signs of struggle and despair in those around us, even during joyous times. The contrast between holiday cheer and private anguish could not be more stark than in this true story. As a gentle winter wind blows through rural North Carolina on Christmas nights, one might imagine it carrying the spirits of Fanny, Marie, and the children, finally at peace, free from the violence that ended their lives. In the small family cemetery, a weathered gravestone bears the entire family's names and that promise of eventual understanding. We'll read the meaning of our tears, and then sometime we'll understand. Such words invite a measure of comfort and hope. They suggest that even when faced with the most horrific tragedy, there is an enduring belief that someday, in some better place or time, the pain will make sense or be healed. In the end, the Lawson family Christmas tragedy is remembered, not only for its shocking brutality, but also for the way it prompts us to cherish the light of humanity that much more. Amid the darkness of that silent night, we search for meaning, in faith, in folklore, or in the simple act of coming together to remember the lost. And as we drift into sleep, we hold our own loved ones a little closer in our hearts, reminded that even in the darkest tales, the flicker of compassion and the hope of understanding can lead us gently toward the dawn. Take a slow, deep breath, and as you exhale, feel the weight of your body sinking into the bed. Allow your eyes to grow heavy. There's nowhere you need to be, and nothing you need to do right now. The room is quiet and safe. As you listen, you'll notice gentle pauses and soft music weaving through the story. These silences are invitations to let your thoughts wander and fade. If your mind begins to solve the mystery, remember, you don't have to figure anything out. Some questions will remain unanswered, and that's all right. Just listen as the story unfolds and let each detail wash over you like a distant memory. Our story takes place on Christmas Eve, 1945, in the quiet countryside near the town of Fayetteville, West Virginia. A light snow dusts the ground, and a chill hangs in the Appalachian air. In a modest two-story farmhouse outside of town lives the Sauter family, enjoying the final hours of a joyful holiday. George Sauter, a 50-year-old Italian immigrant, and his wife Jenny have built a good life here. George runs a small trucking business, and together they are raising 10 children in this home filled with warmth and laughter. World War II had ended only a few months earlier, and one of their sons is still away in the army, but on this night, 9 of the children are at home, safe under one roof. Inside, an evergreen Christmas tree glimmers softly. The younger children are Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louise, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5. They can barely contain their excitement. Earlier that evening, Their 17-year-old sister Marion surprised them with new toys she'd bought from the dime store in town. The little ones laugh and play, begging to stay up past their bedtime to enjoy their presents. Marion and the two older Sauter boys, John, 23, and George Jr., 16, eventually retire for the night, and their tired father George goes to bed as well. But the younger kids linger, still energized by the magic of Christmas. It's around 10:00 p.m. when Jenny Sauter finally shoos the last of the excited children to bed, assuring them that Santa has surely come and gone by now. Jenny herself settles 2-year-old Sylvia, the baby of the family, into her crib in the parents' bedroom, and then drifts off to sleep, grateful for the peaceful holiday. The house falls into a deep, wintry quiet. No one knows that these ordinary moments are the last, truly peaceful ones the Sauters will ever have in this home. Just after midnight, in the early minutes of Christmas Day, 1945, something will happen to shatter the silence. The story that unfolds will turn a night of joy into a decades-long mystery. A little after midnight, Jenny is startled awake by the ringing of the telephone in George's downstairs office. Slipping out of bed in the darkness, she hurries to answer it, careful not to wake the others. On the line, she hears the voice of a woman asking for a name Jenny doesn't recognize, with loud laughter and clinking glasses in the background. Jenny frowns in confusion. It's obviously a wrong number. The caller giggles an apology and hangs up. Still puzzled as to why someone would be calling at such an hour, Jenny locks the front door, which had been left unlocked, and notices that the lights are still on downstairs, which is odd because the family had gone to bed. She switches off the lights and returns to her room, trying not to worry. Outside, the household falls silent once more, and midnight passes into the earliest hours of Christmas morning. Jenny is just dozing off again when a sudden, loud thump hits the roof, followed by a rolling clatter. It sounds as if something has landed with force and then tumbled down the slope of the house. She sits up, startled, and listens. The night returns to stillness. No more sounds now but the wind. Perhaps it was clumps of snow or ice dislodging from the roof, she thinks. After a few tense minutes, when nothing else happens, Jenny calms herself and eventually slips back into an uneasy sleep. Around 1 a.m., Jenny wakes for the third time, this time to the smell of smoke. Thick, acrid smoke is seeping into the bedroom. With a surge of panic, she shakes George awake. He smells it too. Fire! They both leap up and rush into action. Downstairs, they can see orange flames flickering from George's office and spreading into the living room. George and Jenny shout for their children in a frenzy. Fire! Everybody out! Get out! George Jr. and John, sleeping in an upstairs room, hear their father's cries and quickly scramble down the stairs, their hair singed by the heat of flames already climbing the stairwell. In the parents' room, little Sylvia is scooped up from her crib and carried outside by Jenny. 17-year-old Marion, who had fallen asleep on the living room sofa, wakes up and runs out the front door when she sees the flames. In a matter of seconds, George, Jenny, and 4 of their children have escaped into the cold night, coughing in the sooty air and desperately calling for the others to follow. Outside, under the winter stars, George Sauter realizes with horror that 5 of his children have not emerged. Maurice, Martha, Louise, Jenny, and Betty were all sleeping upstairs in 2 separate bedrooms, and none of them are outside. George darts back to the front door and tries to re-enter the house, but a wall of flames drives him back. The staircase is an inferno. He sprints around to the side of the house, heart pounding, determined to reach the upstairs windows from outside. Usually there is a ladder kept propped against the house, one he always leaves by the attic. But in his frantic search, George cannot find it anywhere. It's gone from its usual spot. Later, the ladder would be found tossed down an embankment 75 feet away, as if someone had moved it on purpose. Panicked, George has another idea. He'll drive one of his coal trucks up to the house and climb on top of it to reach the windows. He runs to the trucks where they're parked, engines still loaded from work the day before. Incredibly, neither truck will start, despite having worked fine just hours earlier. George cranks the ignitions repeatedly. The engines sputter and refuse. The trucks had been in perfect working order yesterday, and now it's as if they're mysteriously disabled. Desperate, he even tries to scoop water from a rain barrel to douse the flames, but the water inside is frozen solid by winter cold. All the while, the fire is spreading rapidly through the home. The Sodder children still inside would be trapped upstairs, but George hears no cries now. The only sounds are the roar of the blaze and the shatter of glass as windows explode from the heat. Neighbors, roused from sleep by the commotion, come outside and see the Sodder house engulfed in flames. Marion sprints to a neighbor's home to call for help. In 1945, there is no 911 system. She must phone the operator to connect to the fire department. But when she picks up the neighbor's line, the operator does not respond. Another neighbor has already tried calling the fire chief, only to get no operator. In a last attempt, one neighbor drives into town to find Fire Chief F.J. Morris in person. By the time Chief Morris and his crew finally assemble and arrive, the Sodder home has already been reduced to a pile of smoldering ash. The firefighters do not reach the house until around 8 a.m., nearly 7 hours after the blaze began. It's Christmas morning now, and there is almost nothing left to save. In the pale light of dawn, George and Jenny Sodder stand before the smoking ruins of their home, numb and shivering, with their surviving 4 children huddled around them. They are in shock. Everything happened so fast. They assume the worst, that their 5 missing children were claimed by the inferno. Chief Morris and his men search the wet ashes of the collapsed house, but no remains are found in the brief initial search. Not a single bone, skull, or fragment of flesh is visible amid the debris. Morris suggests that the fire burned hot enough to completely cremate the 5 children's bodies. George and Jenny are distraught and baffled. They know fire, and this theory sounds far-fetched. Could everything, even bones, have been utterly destroyed? Nevertheless, with no bodies and a fire inspector's cursory examination, the authorities conclude the children died in the blaze. Within a few days, death certificates are issued for Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, citing causes of death as fire or suffocation. A coroner's inquest rules the fire an accident caused by faulty electrical wiring, and the case is considered closed. But for the Sodder family, this is only the beginning of something even more unsettling. As the ashes cool, questions smolder beneath them. Jenny Sodder cannot shake the feeling that something is very, very wrong. In the days following the fire, as the surviving Sodders grieve, they begin to notice a series of odd details and coincidences that cast doubt on the official story. The more they investigate, the more they suspect that the fire was not an accident at all, and that their 5 missing children might not be dead. First, there is the fact that no human remains were found in the rubble. Jenny, unable to accept that her children's bodies simply vanished, conducts her own experiments. She starts by burning small piles of animal bones, chicken bones, beef joints, pork bones, in her wood stove and fireplace. Each time, no matter how long the fire burns, she finds charred bone fragments left behind. This makes her deeply skeptical of Chief Morris's claim that 5 whole children could be cremated to nothing in a house fire that was over in about half an hour. In fact, some household appliances in the basement were found melted, but still recognizable in the debris, suggesting the fire wasn't even near the 2,000 degree shift needed to incinerate bone. A local crematorium staff member tells Jenny that even at 2,000 degrees for 2 hours, bones should remain. Yet her home burned down in much less time. It simply didn't add up. Then there were the electrical oddities. If the blaze had been caused by faulty wiring as claimed, the power would have shorted out. Lights in the house should have gone dark. But Jenny distinctly remembered that during the fire, the downstairs lights were still on. She had seen them through the smoke when she was frantically trying to escape. That would only be possible if the fire was not caused by an electrical failure, since functioning lights mean the circuit was intact. Additionally, when the phone company checked the lines, they found that the phone line had been cut, not burned by the fire. Someone had climbed up and cut the wire before or during the fire, knocking out the solder's phone service. A witness would later come forward to admit he was at the solder house that night to steal a block and tackle from the property, and he said he cut the telephone line thinking it was a power line. Why he chose Christmas Eve in the middle of a fire to do this, he couldn't explain, nor could anyone fully believe his story or rule out his involvement in something more sinister. There were also the tools of rescue that mysteriously failed that night. The ladder that was always kept handy had been removed and hidden far from the house. Both of George's work trucks refused to start despite having worked perfectly the day before. Later, a mechanic would find nothing mechanically wrong with them. It felt as if someone had engineered the situation to leave the family helpless as the flames raged. As Jenny and George's shock turns to determination, they begin to piece together memories of the weeks leading up to the fire, memories that, in hindsight, seem ominous. A few months earlier, in the fall of 1945, a stranger had come to their door asking about hauling work. While George was speaking with him, the man wandered around to the back of the house and pointed to 2 separate fuse boxes, casually saying, "This is going to cause a fire someday." George was puzzled. He had recently had the house wiring inspected and approved by the power company, which found it safe. The stranger's comment felt like a strange premonition, or perhaps a veiled threat. Around that same time, another man tried to sell George life insurance. When George declined, the salesman became enraged and warned in a fury, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed for all the dirty remarks you've been making about Mussolini." George was taken aback. It was true that he was an outspoken critic of the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, and he often got into heated arguments with other Italian-American locals who still supported the fascist leader. But for someone to threaten his family over it? It seemed unthinkable at the time. George didn't take it seriously then. assuming the man's outburst was just idle anger. In retrospect, that threat now loomed darkly in the Sodders' minds. There were even reports of a mysterious car spotted in town. In the days before Christmas, the older Sodder children noticed a man parked along the road, watching the younger kids as they came home from school. It was unusual enough to be remembered, though no one recognized the stranger. And then, on the very night of the fire, there were those bizarre happenings just before the blaze. The late-night phone call from a laughing woman to the Sodder house, and the loud object landing on the roof with a thump and roll. In March of the following year, 1946, little Sylvia, who was only a toddler at the time of the fire, was poking around the yard near the burned house and found a small, hard rubber object in the bushes. It was green, tube-like with a curved cap, later believed to be a pineapple bomb, a type of small incendiary device used in warfare. George, a World War I veteran, recognized it immediately. The realization was chilling. Could someone have thrown a firebomb onto the roof that night, causing the blaze? A bus driver passing through Fayetteville late on Christmas Eve even reported that he saw balls of fire being tossed onto a house in the distance. Now it made sense what Jenny had heard. An object hitting the roof and rolling. Perhaps a primitive grenade or firebomb igniting the upstairs. It was evidence that the fire might well have been set intentionally as part of a deliberate plot. All of these clues and strange occurrences pointed in one direction. This fire was no accident, and by extension, the 5 missing Sodder children might not have died in it at all. George and Jenny began to voice a startling theory: that someone set the fire to cover an abduction. The flames might have been meant to draw the parents and older kids out, while kidnappers spirited the 5 younger children away. It sounded incredible, like something out of a nightmare. Yet as they listed each suspicious detail, the cut phone line, the disabled trucks, the removed ladder, the warning threats, the watching stranger, the possible firebomb, the Sodders became convinced that their children could still be alive somewhere. In their hearts, hope and dread intertwined. If the kids were not dead, what had become of them? Who took them, and why? By spring of 1946, the Sodder family's quiet grief had galvanized into a determined search for the truth. George and Jenny Sodder wanted official help, but they quickly found the local authorities unwilling to reopen the case. Frustrated, they turned to outside institutions. In 1947, they sent a plea in writing to the FBI, which had by then gained experience in interstate crimes and kidnappings. Amazingly, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover himself replied to the Sodders' letter. Hoover expressed that he would like to help, but since there was no clear evidence of a federal crime, it was a matter for local authorities. He said the FBI could get involved only if the local police and fire department invited them in, which, unfortunately, Fayetteville's officials refused to do. To the Sodders' dismay, their own town's police and fire chiefs closed ranks and declined outside assistance. It seemed the local authorities were either convinced by the original investigation or simply reluctant to be embarrassed by admitting something was missed. Undeterred, George and Jenny hired a private investigator named C.C. Tinsley to dig deeper. Tinsley was a local gumshoe with a nose for small-town secrets. And indeed, he unearthed a doozy. he discovered that the life insurance salesman who had threatened George with a fire and destroyed children over the Mussolini remarks had later served as a member of the coroner's jury that ruled the fire accidental. In other words, a man who had openly menaced the family had a hand in affirming the official story. This revelation was disturbing. It hinted at a possible conflict of interest or cover-up. Perhaps that salesman, and maybe others, had motivation to make the fire seem like an accident. Tinsley also heard an even stranger tale involving Fire Chief F.J. Morris. Some accounts refer to him as Chief Morris, others as Chief Morris, likely the same man who led the fire response. A local minister confided to the detective that Chief Morris claimed to have found a body part in the ashes, specifically a human heart, and that instead of notifying the family, he hid it in a dynamite box and buried it at the scene. George was outraged at this story and confronted Morris. Perhaps out of guilt or being cornered, the fire chief agreed to show them where he buried the box. The box was dug up and opened. Inside was a hunk of what appeared to be beef liver, untouched by fire. It was not a human organ at all. It looked as if Chief Morris had planted it there at some point, maybe hoping to later discover it and soothe the Sodders with the assumption that their children's remains had been found in the form of internal organs or ashes. If that was his intent, it backfired spectacularly. The incident only further eroded the Sodders' trust in the local authorities. To them, it was clear that some officials were either incompetent or actively deceiving them to close the case. The more the Sodders learned, the more they believed the kidnapping theory. They began to suspect that organized crime or individuals angered by George's political views could be involved. Perhaps the Sicilian mafia or fascist sympathizers had taken revenge on George by abducting his children under the cover of the fire. It was a wild possibility, but nothing else fit the strange facts. George started to recall his own past, arriving in America from Sardinia as a boy, his reluctance to talk about why he left Italy. Could there be a long-forgotten feud or old country grudge at play? This was all speculation, but the Sodders explored every avenue, no matter how far-fetched. Tips and alleged sightings of the children began to pour in from all over. The night of the fire, while the house was still burning, a woman claimed she saw some of the Sodder children looking out of a passing car. Later, another woman who ran a tourist motel between Fayetteville and Charleston, some 50 miles away, said she had served breakfast to 5 children on Christmas morning and noted that the car they arrived in had Florida license plates. A week after the fire, yet another witness, a woman working at a hotel in Charleston, said she saw 4 of the 5 Sodder children accompanied by 2 men and 2 women, all Italian-looking, and that when she tried to chat with the kids, the adults grew hostile and suspiciously cut the conversation short. She noted the group seemed to be protecting the children, preventing them from speaking freely. These accounts were inconsistent and hard to verify, but they gave the Sodders a glimmer of hope that at least someone had seen their missing kids alive. In 1949, after gaining permission from the new state governor, the Sodder family mounted a more thorough excavation of the home site. They hired a pathologist from Washington, D.C., Dr. Oscar Hunter, to supervise a deep dig through the ashes and soil of the basement. Lo and behold, a few objects of interest were found. Some damaged coins, a partly burned dictionary, and several small human vertebrae bones. The bones were sent to the Smithsonian Institution for analysis. The Smithsonian's report concluded that the bones were lumbar vertebrae from one person who was likely 16 to 17 years old. None of the missing Sauter children were older than 14, so the bones didn't match any of them. Moreover, the vertebrae showed no signs of fire exposure. They hadn't been burned in a fire at all. This suggested the bones had come from elsewhere, possibly mixed into the soil that George had bulldozed over the site when he created a memorial garden shortly after the fire. In other words, the 1949 excavation found zero evidence of the 5 children's deaths. What it found instead was puzzling evidence of a different person's bones accidentally in the dirt. The finding confirmed what the Sauters had believed all along. Their children's remains were not in that house. Armed with this new evidence, George and Jenny tried yet again to get an official investigation. The West Virginia state legislature held hearings on the case, and the Sauters even managed to get the attention of national media at times. But ultimately, in 1950, the governor and state police superintendent officially closed the case, declaring it hopeless. The authorities seemed to think the family just couldn't accept the tragedy and was grasping at straws. To George and Jenny, it felt like the door was being slammed in their faces. Refusing to give up, the Sauters took their campaign to the public. They printed and distributed flyers offering a reward for information, and in 1952 they erected a large billboard along Route 16 near the site of their former home. The billboard showed the portraits of the 5 missing children and in bold letters asked, "What was their fate? Kidnapped? Murdered? Or are they still alive?" It offered a $5,000 reward, later raised to $10,000, for any credible information leading to answers. This billboard would become an iconic fixture, seen by anyone driving through Fayetteville for the next 4 decades. It kept the unsolved mystery in the public eye, long after newspapers had forgotten about it. Leads continued to trickle in over the years. A letter arrived from a woman in Missouri claiming one of the girls was in a convent there. A tip came from Texas. Someone overheard a conversation about a long-ago Christmas Eve fire in West Virginia, hinting at a cover-up. George traveled to these places in person to chase down every clue, no matter how thin. He drove across the country multiple times, following rumors of sightings, adopting a detective's life on the road. Each time he came home with nothing definitive. The strain on George and Jenny was immense. Years passed with no answers, but they persisted, fueled by hope and love for their children. Time went on, but the Sauters never stopped searching. By the mid-1960s, more than 20 years had passed since the fire. George and Jenny were getting older, but the ache of not knowing the fate of their children never dulled. Then, in 1967, a new tantalizing clue appeared. Jenny went to the mailbox and found an envelope addressed only to her. It was postmarked Central City, Kentucky, with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a portrait of a young man in his mid-20s. On the back, scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting, were these words: Louis Sauter. I love brother. Frankie Elil boys, A90132 or 35. The cryptic message sent chills through Jenny. Louis Sauter was the name of their son, who was 9 at the time of the fire. Could this be him? Grown up? The man in the photo had the same dark, curly hair and strong, straight nose as Louis. He even had the same upward tilt to his left eyebrow that Louis had as a child. To George and Jenny, it truly looked like an older Louis, perhaps around 30, which would be roughly Louis's age by 1967. Their hearts pounded. Could at least one of their children have survived into adulthood? They hurriedly hired another private detective to go to Kentucky and track down any information about this mysterious photograph. If he went, they never heard back from him again. He vanished without a trace, along with the photograph's trail. It was another dead end, and possibly a cruel hoax. The Sodders weren't sure what to believe. They feared making the photo public or naming the city in case it put their son in danger if it was him. So instead, they added the new photo of the young man to the billboard next to Louis's childhood picture. This way, the world could see what Louis might look like as an adult. The family continued to hold out hope that someone somewhere knew the truth and would come forward. By this time, George Sodder was in his 70s. In 1968, he gave an interview in which he said, "It's like hitting a rock wall. We can't go any further. We just don't know what to do now." It was one of the few times he voiced the weariness that must have burdened him. He had spent the rest of his life, and life savings, doggedly pursuing shadows, trying to find his missing children. George died in 1969 with the mystery unresolved. He was 73 years old. Jenny and the surviving children continued to investigate on their own, refusing to let the story die. Jenny, forever a grieving mother, wore black in mourning every day from the fire onward. She built a fence around her property and added rooms onto the house she moved into, almost as if building layers of protection from any further harm. She never stopped waiting for a break in the case. Jenny Sodder passed away 20 years later in 1989 at the age of 85. Up until her last days, she still accepted phone calls and letters from people who claimed to have clues, no matter how outlandish. And that billboard along Route 16, with the 5 familiar young faces, stood there fading and weathering for 37 years. It finally came down when Jenny died, a quiet acknowledgement that an era had ended. The Sodder children who survived that awful night went on to grow up, marry, and have children of their own. But they too were haunted by the absence of their siblings. Over the decades, they have discussed their own theories in hushed tones at family gatherings. Some suspected the mafia had tried to extort money from their father and then followed through on threats when he refused. Others thought maybe someone the kids knew and trusted lured them out of the house and into hiding for safety, only for them to eventually meet a tragic fate elsewhere. There were even rumors of a child trafficking ring that might have taken the Sodder children, selling them into adoption. But no theory has ever been proven. The youngest Sodder child, Sylvia, grew from that 2-year-old rescue from the crib into a woman who lived her entire life in the shadow of a question. She was the last surviving Sodder sibling, and into her late 70s she still visited websites and forums where amateur sleuths discussed the case, always hoping for a breakthrough. Sylvia said that for as long as she lived, she would never let the story die. She passed away in 2021 at the age of 79, still believing in her heart that her brothers and sisters might have escaped the fire all those years ago. With her death, those closest to the events are gone, and any secrets they carried have likely gone with them. It's now been 8 decades since that Christmas Eve. The Sodder children, if any survived, would be elderly themselves. The year after Sylvia's death, in 2022, a local newspaper noted that it would be public enough that if the children wanted to be found later in life, they would have contacted their family by now. It seems painfully likely that we will never know what really happened in Fayetteville on Christmas 1945. The missing Sauter children remain missing, their fate one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries of the holiday season. Picture the quiet hillside in West Virginia where the Sauter house once stood. The night is calm now. Perhaps there's a moon overhead, illuminating the bare trees and the outlines of old foundations. For years, a big billboard stood by the road near this spot, with 5 youthful faces gazing out into the night, silently asking for answers. In your mind's eye, you can see that lonely sign under the stars, the snow drifting around it. So much longing and mystery held in those photographs, and yet the night remains silent. As you lie here, imagine the stillness of that winter night long ago. The soft hush after the fire, the snow settling on blackened ruins, the questions that hung in the cold air. Where did the children go? Who lit the flame that erased a family's world? These questions have lingered for generations, like faint echoes. The truth is hidden somewhere, perhaps lost to time. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, let go of the need to solve this puzzle. We may never know the full story, and in this moment, that's okay. Feel the warmth of your bed and the steady beating of your heart. The Sauter family's love and determination endured through uncertainty, and now their mystery can simply drift like a distant cloud in your mind. There's nothing to fix or figure out tonight. All the loose ends of the tale can unfurl and float away. Imagine each unanswered question rising like a spark from the embers higher and higher until it disappears into the dark. The night is peaceful now. The story with all its unresolved secrets can gently fade. Allow yourself to release the mystery with each slow breath. Let your thoughts dissolve into the quiet. Feel the comfort of not needing any resolution, just the soft envelope of sleep closing around you. The Sauter children's story remains, in the end, a whisper on a winter wind, and now that whisper grows faint, turning into silence. All that's left is the stillness of this moment. Let that stillness guide you into rest. Some mysteries, like this one, will stay open, and we make peace with that. Nothing more is needed tonight. You are safe, you are warm, and the world is quiet.